Hi, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So, if you were hoping to get your last glass of wine, go ahead and take care of that. Hi, my name is Destiny. I am the book club coordinator here at this store, City Bookshop. Is there anybody who's here for the very first time at the store? Woo! A huge round of applause. Thank you for being here. We are so glad you're here. We hope it won't be the last. A few housekeeping items. So restrooms are upstairs and past the cards. Um, you can take care of whatever you need with that. We have tons of events here at the store. This is one of many. I hope you will check out our events calendar online, which is up to date. If you could do us a huge favor right now and silence your cell phones, we'd be most appreciative. We do not want any interruptions. We have books for purchase upstairs. A lot of them were signed actually, some of them not, but there will be a signing after. I was told to inform the audience that if you'll be seeing Vera later, then you are all good to wait until then to get your books signed. I think that is it. Oh, hello, virtual audience. Hello, I see you. And we will have an opportunity for questions from you as well. And I think that is it. So I will go ahead and jump into introducing our authors for this evening. Alex Finlay is the author of the 2021 breakout novel, Every Last Fear, the 2022 Goodreads Choice nominee for Best Mystery and Thriller, The Night Shift, which is really great, and his latest March 2023 release, Library Reads Hall of Fame recipient, What Have We Done? Alex's novels are regularly on the best of the year lists, have been translated into 19 languages, and Every Last Fear is in development for a series on a major streaming service. Vera Kurian is a writer and scientist. Her short fiction has been published in magazines such as Glimmer Train, Day One, and The Pinch. She's lived in DC for most of her adult life and has a PhD in social psychology. Never Saw Me Coming was her first novel, and we are here today to celebrate her second novel. If you were to ask any member of staff for a psychological thriller set in DC, they would more than likely mention Never Saw Me Coming among their recommendations. We've sold hundreds of copies of the book. It's been a book club pick here at this store. And we are very, very excited to host her for the launch of A Step Past Darkness, which I like to call a wonderfully creepy read. And I cannot wait to hear them talk about it. Please join me in welcoming both Alex and Vera.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm, as you heard, Alex Finlay. I'm super excited that I got an early read of this tremendous novel. In the writing world, there's something called the trade review, which is like the publishing industry's official review of the books that come out at a particular time. And all of us writers long to get what's called the starred review. This is the one that says you're the standout of all these other great books that come out. And I'm pleased to say that Vera received a starred review. Um, Booklist said the novel Vera created unforgettable characters, breathless suspense, and original plotting, an absolute must read. And I have to say, I totally agree. So first off, congratulations.
Thank you.
And why don't we start off by having you tell everyone a little bit about what the story's about?
Sure. This is working, right? Okay. So it's I'm pretty explicit about the fact that this book is an homage to Stephen King's It, even though it's not a horror novel, but that's my favorite novel of his. But it's about a group of high school kids in 1995 who are thrown together to work on this summer project. And while at a party in the local abandoned mine, they witness something horrifying, and they spend the summer trying to figure out what had happened. And then 20 years later, they're called back when one of them is murdered to solve that mystery. So there's two mysteries spread across two timelines. And it's one of those novels that very much has the town as another character or place is like very, very important for the story. And it's quite different than my last book, I'd say.
Yeah, and it's you know, you really you center around these six basically high school kids in the 90s who are all very different. I got a Breakfast Club meets Stephen King vibe from it. And so talk a little bit about these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I really love an ensemble cast. And I feel like sometimes they're not done very well because the
You've been
characters.
reading my books?
No. Present company excluded. That sometimes the characters are too thin, and then you're like, I don't even remember who is who. And one thing that's like really admirable about Stephen King's It is that there's 7 main characters, and all of them feel fully realized, even if there are some similarities between them. In this case, um, I don't think any of them is kind of like an archetype, even though it's pretty easily to slot them into like one is kind of, you know, the pothead, one is like the good girl. But I spent a lot of time, actually a month, just working on characters, not writing any text whatsoever, of just like, do I know this person inside and out before I even started writing the text? So that they do feel fully realized. And then I had a little more length in this book to do some stuff that was just character work and not so much like this rapid propulsive thing like the last book was.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about this character. Do you write bios of them, or do you figure out what kind of music? I've heard writers do different things.
Yeah, so I typically I have a long article about this on my Substack if you're interested, but I will sort of poke around for pictures of people that kind of look like how I think they look. And then I'll fill out 2 really long questionnaires, one of which is generic and it's just kind of stuff like what type of books do they read? You know, what do they like to do in their free time? And then the other is the Proust questionnaire, which is more philosophical. Like, what do they admire most in people? What do they hate the most about themselves? Which are really, you know, quite psychological. And over the course of doing this, which takes hours, I kind of am making things up, but then they sort of click into place. And I'll know, like, it feels like I'm unveiling something that's already there. And then by the time I get writing, that solidifies more, such that like I recently went back and looked at one of these questionnaires, and there was something about that James had a Robert Jordan book on his floor, and like he wouldn't read Robert Jordan. Like I know that now, but I didn't know that then. In the course of writing it, I come to have a greater understanding, so that if someone just asked me like, what flavor Pop-Tart do they like, I would be able to answer it. And that's because that's from my background in literary fiction, of the character being the most important.
And as a scientist, it sounds like, because I don't do anything like that.
Yeah.
Very analytical. But it just works so well. What I loved about it was how you have these characters and they're teenagers, and you learn about what they think about themselves, but you're also learning about how that differs from what their high school peers view them. And then you get to see them, 20 years later and see, where they've gone. And it was really, really just a great character driven novel in the best kind of way. So who's your favorite character if you had to pick one?
It's hard because I kind of love them all in a way. I mean, I love the villain without saying more about that, but probably James. But I have like an empathy for all of them.
I like James the best because in high school he got in trouble and had to turn his shirt inside out, which I had to do. James,
the shirt?
James is younger than me, so he had a Jane's Addiction shirt in the 90s. I probably had a Motley Crue 80s guy, but that happened to me. So
one of my favorite parts of the book is that this other character, Padma, is looking at him with the shirt inside out, and she's like, "Who is Jane, and what is she addicted to?" Which is very on brand for her.
So I want to talk a little bit about Gia. Gia opens the story, and she is called. This is 20 years after this awful event, and she's basically called to the town by the sheriff or the law enforcement head. I don't know, it's the sheriff, who is a classmate of theirs, and it's because she has certain like kind of powers. I don't know if you call it psychic powers, the right word or what, but I was surprised as a scientist that as a choice, and I would be interested to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the book for parts of it, you might be like, is this going into a territory where there's supernatural stuff? And I think to open the story with just you're accepting as fact. This woman knows things she shouldn't know. She's been called into this town to find a missing person. And there's a paragraph where the sheriff is sort of thinking about, you know, she sent him an email right before 9/11. She told him stock tips. And like, so we've established this is a fact. We don't fully understand it. And neither does she. And she really struggled with that as a child before coming more into her own about it. And part of the book is about her kind of struggling to understand what that is and what her abilities are and how they can be used to battle whatever it is that they're about to battle.
Yeah, and so as a scientist, like where did this does you have an interest in this, or what kind of research did you do? I was just curious.
About the psychic part?
Yeah.
Well, so I'm like a very flaming atheist. Like I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in psychic phenomenon or ghosts or anything. But I'm a massive horror fan, and I think a lot of the best horror is supernatural, and I can still be scared of it even though I don't believe in it. But I mean, I think not it's not the case that all of these kids are outcast. I mean, like I think three of them are actually popular. But everyone when they're in high school feels different and weird and why can't I be like other people? And to some extent, each of these people feels like this in a different way, which that's just like a function of being 15 or 16.
So you mentioned the setting being a character, and I thought that really rang true with me. You've got this kind of um, town that has this dark kind of atmosphere. It's kind of got this mega church as the center of community life there, and but you also have a like centered on the story is this coal mine, and when we met for the first time, it was during COVID, and we didn't know each other. We did a virtual event, and at the end of it, they said, "Oh, what's your next book you're working on?" We both had a coal mine as center on our story, which is weird. But anyway, talk a little bit about that setting, and did you do any research, and what got you there?
I'm very much scared of the dark and scared of small places going underground. Um, and if you've ever heard of Centralia, Pennsylvania, that is a town. It's a ghost town now where there is an underground mine fire, which actually they're actually really common. And there's an underground mine fire on every continent except for Antarctica right now, and they're like horrifying for the environment because of the amount of gases that gets released. But this fire started people were trying to live in this town still, but like the gas station had to close because it was about to blow up. So things were collapsing and had subsidences and all these other things. And so eventually the town was condemned and people had to leave and it became this ghost town. So this town, there are two towns next to each other that were coal mining towns, and then one died and the other survived. And then you have this abandoned coal mine, which of course kids are going to go into the coal mine, which they really shouldn't do. But there's something weird and otherworldly about this coal mine. Like there's paths that seem to go nowhere and that are so narrow you can't fit through them. And they're like, what were they doing in this coal mine? But I wanted this whole town be feel fully realized. So it's a suburban town in Pennsylvania that used to be coal mining. It's dominated by this mega church where anyone who's important is in the mega church. There's a lot of social stratification. It's basically like the town that I grew up in, except we had no coal mine. It was very very narrow-minded. No one could be different. No one could be LGBT. Everyone had to be the same. And what the social stratification in this town is really important for the storyline. In other words, the town being another character.
Did you visit any coal mines?
So I have been to coal mines before, not for the purpose of the book. I wanted to go to Centralia, but they actually tore down a lot of the stuff there, and it's trespassing to go there. And I was like, I kind of want to go, but I didn't go.
my coal mining research was I thought, well, I'm putting a coal mine in. I know nothing about it. I usually don't do any research because I'm super lazy. But I thought, well, this is a serious job. I got to kind of respect it. It's pretty dangerous. So I went to I reached out. West Virginia University has this big coal mining safety program, and but the only time they could get me to come was on my 30th wedding anniversary.
No.
So you see where this is going. So anytime I bring up that, my wife looks at that book, her jaw clenches a little because she
Wait, you
remembers.
went?
Yes,
I didn't think that was the end of the story.
that's the yeah. She's thinking about the Taco Bell and the abandoned hotel. So it's not nearly as romantic as I'm making it sound. So you're not just the setting, really part of the character is this time period, particularly the 90s. And there's a lot of love for 90s nostalgia, 80s nostalgia now. And I've seen in some books where people force it, they throw in every reference they can, and it doesn't just have the authenticity. But I really thought you nailed like just picking the right little things, and I wondered if you could talk about that process. Was it just natural, or did you really calculated about the references that you put in?
I deliberately said it in 1995 and they're 15 because that was when I was 15. So I was like, this is going to be historically accurate. So there's no cell phones. You just wandered around after school and your parents weren't asking where you were. The internet, like maybe if you were more wealthy, you had AOL. So like some of the characters have AOL and they're IMing each other and then had with their buddy lists and the chat rooms, ASL. And then some people don't. And like we didn't have internet at school. And then you know, where I went to high school, nobody was out of the closet. In my town, there were no gay people ostensibly. And then also I looked at the calendars of like, the first day in the 1995 period, what was happening then. It was the day that O.J. Simpson tried the glove on. And it was like such a huge deal at the time of like people talking about it and like debating it. And like, people in the book have different attitudes about it based on who they are. Um, so in some sense, the world felt a lot smaller because nowadays, if you were like kind of a weird kid who liked occult stuff, you would just go online and meet other people like that. But this is a point in time where if you were the one weird kid, there was no other place, to go. So I wanted that kind of 90s feel to be authentic of like they can't just pull out some piece of technology to solve a problem. There's a time where someone is trying to investigate something like take pictures of something and then she goes to develop the film and it comes out all black because that happened. Like those of you who are Gen Z don't understand this pain. Sometimes you took important pictures and then you didn't get them back because they got messed up somehow. And that's a thing that happened.
I just thought Cool Ranch Doritos captured it for me. Your references to that, I don't know why. It was like, yeah. Maybe I'm imagining that,
They were so cool. No, they bring them to the party for the month. Yeah.
So I have to ask your favorite. Your shirt might answer this. Your favorite '90s band is what I was going to ask you, but
It's not Nirvana. Okay. No, it's probably Smashing Pumpkins, which is referenced in the book.
Favorite '90s movie?
Oh my God, '90s movie. It has to be something like what is the one with Ethan Hawke where he looks kind of dirty? He's very hot in it.
Yeah, Reality Bites. Reality Bites. Yes.
Maybe that one.
Let's talk a little bit more about you. Okay, you're a scientist, and I just think that, and I read is you have a PhD in social psychology. You studied intergroup relations, ideology, and quantitative methods. I always feel dumb when I go to a cocktail party in DC, but it never cease to amaze. So what led that to writing crime fiction?
I actually started writing when I was in school, like fourth or fifth grade, because I was bored a lot and didn't have a lot of friends, to be honest. And I was just daydream all the time, constantly. And then I think I had these two parallel careers where I wrote for a hobby, but because I was interested in human psychology, I ended up studying that. But then I always had this like side thing. And then now that I'm a writer and I'm trying to do it like for real, I do end up using a lot of my kind of analytical side to deal with the practicality of like writing a book is an enormous feat. And like if you're an artist, people will just think that you just sort of like dream it up. But the reality is a lot of it is just practical dealing with the grist of like doing this work. So I think that having that analytical side actually helps me get through some of those humps.
And you say you're trying to be more of a writer. I think that's you're kind of already past that, but I wanted to mention your first book was a mega success. You know, you had a nominated for the Edgar Award, which is the most prestigious award for crime fiction and mysteries and thrillers. The New York Times said it was one of the best thrillers of 2021. Having there's something called the sophomore slump that everybody worries about. I wondered about how you dealt with the pressure.
I was really terrified of that. And I've kind of looked at other people's careers and I feel like I think sometimes you get a bad second book because you're under deadline and you weren't under deadline the first time. And I was terrified of that. And I had a choice when I was talking to my publisher about did we want to try to do like a sequel to the first book, which would have been easy for me, or did we? And I was like, well, I have this other idea, but it's really like big and ambitious, and it's gonna be like super long. And they were like, eh. And then they didn't want to do a sequel because I didn't think that was good for my career, which I think was correct. And I was like, this is a big ambitious book. If you gave me a full year, I could do it, and I will check in with you as much as you want. But I was going to do something that was bigger and more ambitious. And so it was like, if I'm going to do an ensemble cast, I'm going to do it right. If I'm going to do dual timeline, I'm going to do it my way. And I'm not going to do any kind of like, cheating. I'm going to have it be for real. They're actually going to age and be different people looking back on who they were. And I wanted to do everything right. I have a fantastic editor because what I handed her was like, it was a thing. And she really asked the right questions to hone this thing in that what it is now is just like it's a super tight book. And as much as I love the first book, this is just a better book.
No, it is a great book, and you really nailed it. It's kind of depressing because I would have gone with easy. Oh, I'm in. Sequel. Favorite thing about being a writer?
I mean, I just love talking about books with people, and I think when you come up with a moment that you want someone to have a particular emotional reaction to, whether it's laughing or crying or gasping, and you find out that someone actually did that, it's like just the most satisfying thing. I mean, I think, receiving over COVID, receiving emails from people being like, my sister's in treatment for cancer right now, and this book was making her laugh. Like that's just like the best not the cancer part, but I think the best possible thing that you can hear from someone is that you gave someone joy or something. And like, I'm not writing War and Peace or something. I'm writing thrillers, but that people want that like escapism or something, a romance or something to make them laugh or something. And if you can deliver that to them and it makes them happy, of like, that's kind of the best thing there is.
Worst thing about being a writer?
Um, I I mean, I'm constantly looking at how successful other writers are and being like, I'm not like, oh, I got nominated for an Edgar Award. It's like I lost an Edgar Award as far as I'm concerned. So I'm constantly like, I was like, I'll do things like look up how many ratings someone else has and try to calculate like how many sales. It's not good. I can't stop doing it. I've had to block myself off certain websites. I used to read all the Goodreads reviews. It's horrible. Um, and that's what I'm a competitive person, so I end up doing that, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help sales to do that. I mean, it just wastes my time.
I've been there. Uh, so getting close to time, but for any people who are trying to get published here, writing advice or advice in general.
The first thing would be like read a ton all the time, and I would say have some of that reading be literary fiction, whether you write literary fiction or not. I would also say like it's harder than it looks, because a lot of people think writing is accessible. Like no one goes up to an oboe player and is like, "Oh, I always wanted to play the oboe." But people do that to writers all the time because people have written a short story in school or something. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of rejection. And if you're not willing to go through 1,000 rejections, when people look at someone who had a book deal, like my first book sold like really fast, she's like lucky or whatever. No, I got rejected from 300 agents first, and like wrote multiple other books first. And you just have to like keep going and keep refining your craft, and like something will hit at the right time if you keep doing it.
Yeah, that's what I say to people is, you're a writer when you've just been through this ringer that almost every published writer I've met has gone through, just mountains of rejection, but you got back up and you kept doing it. And that's, I think that's the definition of a writer. Um, Last thing before we turn to audience questions, are you working on something else that you can talk about, or
Yeah, I'm working on a crime novel about if any of you have ever read the GQ profile of Robert Pattinson during COVID, where he's like crazy. Okay. It's very niche. Imagine that guy, except he's a musician, like a young kind of wonderkind musician who's just like very weird, who's come out of nowhere, and he is stricken ill and he needs a bone marrow transplant, but he's estranged from his entire family for reasons. And then things come, things happen, and then three people end up dead. So it's about that.
right? That sounds great. So why don't we open it up to any questions? Feel free to raise your hand. In the back.
Share with us what your writing space at home or office looks like. When I was a grad student doing something similar, like for me, I would take little index cards and then I found a corkboard and just sort of pin them up and pull them down as I was able to sort of successfully integrate it into my computer. So I don't know if you have post-it notes everywhere, you have a little book.
It's so my actual writing space is a kitchen table with a monitor and all of my mail from the past few weeks, dirty dishes, a cat that jumps on there, leaving God knows what on the table, any number of odds and ends. It's messy, and I don't take pictures of it to show my cute writing space. But what is very, very, very organized is where I actually plan out books. I have extremely detailed outlines. The outline for this book was 30,000 words, which is the size of a novella. I have very detailed character outlines. I use Scrivener just for planning, and then I write in Microsoft Word. But when it came to like when I did my editing with the editor, I had to do a fairly major rewrite. I did use things like index cards and actually had to write out plot summaries and be like, does this make sense, or how do I get from B to C? So it's actually a lot of like logical puzzle making, where you are both kind of, you write yourself into a corner, but then you realize I'm the person who made the corner. So you rewrite the corner. But so the like physical space is disgusting, but the mental space is very organized.
Yes. Well, let me repeat the
Oh
question.
yeah. What my favorite or least favorite tropes in a genre? Do you mean in the genre of mystery thriller? So I would say my least favorite is I don't like twists. I've written a whole article about it. You can find it. I think I don't like twists for the sake of like making, pulling the rug out from under the reader. I'm very old fashioned in that sense. I like old fashioned detective work. Probably, I'm trying to think of what my favorite tropes are. I mean, obviously you can tell from the book. I love an unexpected group of people coming together. That happened in my first book, and that happens in this book. I like, kind of found family, like unexpected friendships. I'm trying to think of tropes from mysteries that I like. I mean, the amateur sleuth is my favorite sleuth. Like, I don't really even read mysteries that have a professional sleuth, like a detective or a police officer. Because I want to know, like, well, how would someone like me be solving this mystery? Like, they're not going to have a computer that links to the network or something. They're just going to be normal people.
As a side note, the first line in the marketing materials for my next book is a twist you won't forget. Any other other questions of this side of the room? No? Right here.
So all the books seem to be more mystery thriller, the book that you're planning and the first two books. I'm wondering what of all the genres you read and what got you into mystery thriller? Thinking like, here's what I want to write in, and do you see that staying the same for all future books, or what are you kind of toying with?
So the first book I actually wrote was a literary novel, and then the second book was a space opera. And then Never Saw Me Coming is a straight thriller. this, I was saying it's a mystery with horror elements, and they're like, it's a thriller. The next book actually leans away from being a thriller and is more of a literary leaning crime novel. Crime novels are different, I think, than mysteries or thrillers. I've had this discussion with my publisher and my agent, and I was like, I write in different genres. That's going to be my brand. When most of the time, if you write mystery, they kind of expect you to write the same type of mystery. And I was like, I don't think that's how readers think. Like, when I heard Jordan Peele was going from comedy to horror, I was like, that makes sense, and I will follow him. And that's the kind of reader I want. Where I was talking about this with my agent, like, you shouldn't be surprised if I write a Western or something totally out there, because I just, kind of go where my mind takes me. And like the thing that's the same is the way that I write, not the genre. So there could be a space opera out there. I mean, I have hundreds of pages of a space opera. So yes, I'll tell my agent.
Yes.
You spoke earlier about you spent a lot of time creating these characters and you had a lot of empathy for all of them. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that some harm and or peril comes to at least one of them. And so I'm wondering if you had any feelings about that, or like if that's hard for you at all.
Yeah, so I think like I became a writer because of Stephen King. One of the things I admire about him is that for the most part, he does right by his characters, and that doesn't mean they don't experience harm. They experience enormous harm, sometimes horrifying harm. And I think that, but you can still feel like he has compassion for his characters, and that doesn't mean that he gives them, what is the word, plot armor. So I mean, I do there. One of the most horrifying things that happens in the book is not supernatural. It's the part you're talking about is just everyday evil of that is the reality of some people's lives. And I wanted this book, to have, there's different triads within this group of 6 kids. There's 3 kind of popular kids and 3 that aren't. And then there's 3 that have kind of good families and 3 that have bad families. So I wanted to show the home life of each of those families, and the 3 who have bad families in different ways. And for me, that part was important for bonding this group together of like, even though would have never been friends with you at school, we've been through this like incredible thing together. And that was always kind of an idea that I was fascinated with. But I mean, that part still gets me when I read it. It's difficult to read, but I think had to be there. Well, I couldn't, there's certain harm I couldn't bear to do to any of them. But I couldn't do that. But other harm I could.
Yes.
Do I have to repeat the question if it's okay? Were there edits that were challenging to do, and that's any that would surprise me? I mean, when you hand in your book, of course you think it's perfect, and they're like, "Oh my God, they have serious edits," and then it makes sense after a day of sitting on it, and I was like, "Yes, this makes sense. This wasn't clear." In the sense of it being difficult, when you get an edit letter, I think it feels insurmountable when you first get it, and I think so. I actually time the amount of time I spend writing and the amount of time I just spent plotting out how to handle the edits just from thinking was 24 hours. I don't mean one day, I mean 24 hours over the course of a couple weeks. So I had to like pull up the puzzle and refit things together. And that was difficult. It was not impossible. And I find it kind of fun because it's like problem solving of like, how do I rewrite this corner? And I what she asked me to do made the book a much better book, much more clear and much more fully grounded.
Other questions? Yes.
She asked me to talk about the villain. I mean, there's a few villains. The main villain is based, if you've ever seen the 80s horror movie Fright Night, it's based on Chris Sarandon's portrayal of a vampire, where he just has this like fabulous wardrobe and it's very charming, but also sinister. And I love that vibe. And I always picture this character like Chris Sarandon. So you'll know when you get to this character of who he is, of like, you want your villain to be charming and sexy and be well dressed. Don't you? I do.
Yes.
So one thing I love about your first book is the cast back. And I really appreciate how different they all are from each other. So like, where do you draw inspiration from, especially for those characters who have a very different background from your?
Yeah. That's a good question. Sure.
Fan service for being in DC.
Sure.
We have a clear character.
I don't want to spoil it. And by saying that, I've given it away. Yeah. So writing someone, there's two characters in this book that are Asian. One's Korean American and one is Indian American, and there's some similarities to my upbringing, but they're different. But there is an athlete who's like gonna go, like a D1 level athlete, and then there's an extremely Christian girl, and that is like so far afield from who I am as a person. I spent a lot of time researching football, and there's not that much football in this book, but I was like, I need to understand what it takes to be a D1 level athlete and what type of person they are and how hard they have to work. And the relationship with a coach of like really wanting to please this coach. And then the Christian character, which like the extreme opposite of me, like I'm an extreme atheist and she's an extreme evangelical Christian. Like I actually really wanted to treat that respectfully because I think a lot of atheists treat religion disrespectfully. And I wanted to have a realistic portrayal of someone who's evangelical, who's struggling with her faith, and then comes to a different conclusion about her faith while still keeping it. And that was a little hard for me because I often default to my characters not being particularly religious because that's not how I think. But I wanted to have a fair treatment of her religion that was empathetic to how someone who's different from me would think. So we'll wait to see if I get hate mail about it. There's probably going to be some evangelical hate mail.
Okay, we got time for one more. I guess we'll take it online.
So someone was asking, am I thinking about branching out to other formats such as serial podcasts? If there's a serial podcaster out there that wants me, I have a great voice for radio. I
have a great face for radio. Cool.
I've been taking screenwriting for the past year, so I have a screenplay that's mostly done. That's like a thriller. I'd like to write a horror movie because that's like my bread and butter. I am really interested in podcasting. I don't really have the time to do one on my own, but I would love to do one. And other mediums, I don't know what other mediums are. And then I have a Substack, which is mainly about writing and publishing. But I actually am kind of interested in doing interactive fiction via Substack, but that would take me having more of a subscriber base if you want to subscribe.
Okay. So, well, thank you, Vera. And thank you everyone for
Thanks
coming.
hosting. Thank you for coming.
And I hope you'll stick around to have Vera sign your books and buy some other books while you're here and support this great store.
Thank you. Thank you again. Can we give them another round of applause? Oh yeah. Okay, so how we're gonna make this work is in a moment, not yet, my middle school teacher coming out. We will fold the chairs if you can, and you can just kind of lean them up gently. And then we're gonna have the signing line over here in about 2 or 3 minutes. We just need to get it set up. So definitely prioritizing these folks who are here to get the chairs folded. All right, thank you.